Previously on Dragon Ball Hakai, after the attack by the Celestial Mages to gain possession of the 5 great primordial beasts, the gods of the 12 universes hold a meeting to discuss the next steps they must take to prepare for war that will occur in 6 months. To clarify the entire matter, Daishinkan called upon Pikkon to address the gods, explaining the whole situation and answering all the questions. But in the midst of the meeting, Beerus confesses his complete lack of sympathy for Pikkon, and while threatening the leader of the Celestial Guardians, he demands that he clarify why he wasn't alerted about his master's body being used by the Celestial Mages. Does Pikkon have a good explanation for this? Will Beerus really fulfill his promise and put an end to him? Find out now. Hakai. But before I tell you what happens in this chapter 28, I want to ask you to leave a like on the video, as liking the video is extremely important for it to have a good reach here on the platform. For Dragon Ball Hakai to continue, we need this story to keep being a success, and for that, it needs to have a good reach here on the platform. So if you want to help Dragon Ball Hakai continue here on YouTube, please leave a like on the video, because even though it might not seem like it, this is very important. Now on to the chapter. Chapter 28, War Council. Part 2. While displaying a furious expression and a very threatening demeanor, Beerus tells the chief of the Celestial Guardians that he had better provide a highly convincing explanation for why he didn't disclose an enemy with the appearance and memories of his master, or else he will make him pay for it. Pikkon is not at all pleased with Beerus's words and tone of voice, and he stares back at him with a discomforted expression. But someone else who is not pleased at all with Beerus's attitude is Daishinkan, who tells him that he will have to ask him not to threaten their guest. In agreement with the Grand Priest, one of the Zenos says that if Beerus does it again, they will have to erase him, and the other Zeno agrees. In the blink of an eye, all that menacing aspect of Beerus disappears, and going from a threatening wildcat to a frightened kitten, he immediately bows and apologizes to the great Zeno for his offense. Goku decides to lighten the heavy atmosphere by asking a question. He seizes on Beerus's query and expresses his own curiosity. He recalls that Odisu wore an outfit very similar to the one Pikkon wears, and he mentioned someone named Anzen, who is the same person Pikkon mentioned. Pikkon starts responding to Goku's question, saying that a strange event occurred. He recounts that after the attack, they found the bodies of all the Celestial Guardians scattered around the fortress, confirming their deaths and the possession of their corpses. But after he saw Brajin kidnapping Zuno, he realized that her appearance was identical to one of the Guardians who had died, and that made him suspicious about the authenticity of the bodies they found. At that moment, Beerus interrupts Pikkon's explanation and asks with an angry and suspicious expression if he didn't think about telling them this. He reminds him that while they were on their way to his planet after the meeting of the gods of destruction, Pikkon even spoke to him about Terran. As his irritation grows, he asks if Pikkon didn't think to talk to him about the possibility of his master's body being used by the enemies. Daishinkan observes Beerus's words attentively, perhaps watching to see if the destroyer intends to return with that aggressive approach, or maybe agreeing with the question and paying attention to the response that will be given. After listening attentively and silently to Goku's question and Beerus's accusation, Pikkon starts to respond. He says that at that moment it was impossible for him to know that Terran's body was being used. He explains that everything happened very quickly, from Zuno's abduction to the Celestial Mage's attack for the beast cocoon, and it was only during that time frame that the Celestial Guardians could investigate the matter of the corpses. The Chief Guardian explains that while he went after Janemba's cocoon and another Guardian went after the cocoon containing the dormant power of Majin Buu, a third Guardian stayed at their base to examine the bodies, and it was only then that he discovered that among the Guardian corpses, 5 were fake. Iwan, the god of destruction of Universe 1, asks how a fake corpse can be possible. Pikkon mentions Zorki, the great illusion mage, and explains that this mage has the power to create nearly perfect illusions. So when they saw all the corpses, they couldn't initially identify that some of them were not real. It was only when he saw the body that Brajin was using that they decided to conduct a more thorough analysis. So he asked the other Guardians to examine the corpses using a magical relic of the Order, and it was only through this that he discovered the fake corpses. This analysis was only completed after the mage's attack, so before that it was impossible for him to know that Terran or Master Anzen had been used as hosts by the mages. Just a note guys, all the events from chapter 7 to this chapter 28 probably took place on the same day. You might not realize this because many chapters have passed, but most of them were filled with battles. This isn't the first time this has happened in Dragon Ball. A significant portion of the Majin Buu saga, for example, took place on the same day despite being being a very long saga. So if the Celestial Guardians only found out about their deceased companions' bodies being used at the time of Zuno's abduction, it makes sense that they could only confirm this information after the mage's attack. Taking advantage of this brief pause in the story, I want to remind you that if you want to directly support the production of Dragon Ball Hakai, you can do so through our Patreon with a very small contribution. You can help the production of Dragon Ball Hakai and also receive some exclusive benefits here on the channel. It's thanks to our supporters that the manga is still being produced. But for even faster production, we need more resources, so if you want to see more chapters more frequently, please help us out. Anyway, let's continue with the chapter. In all this matter involving the theft of the Guardians' corpses by the mages, there's a very important detail that hasn't been explained yet, which is why the mages did this. And it's Jin, the god of destruction of Universe 12, who asked the master of the Guardians this question. He says he doesn't understand the reason why the mages stole the Guardians' bodies and asks why they didn't keep their original bodies. Pikkon responds by saying that when he used the sealing magic on them, he made only the souls of the mages sealed, and after that they destroyed their bodies. Hellas deduces that it was because of this that after they were freed, they inserted their souls into the bodies of the deceased Guardians. Belmont asks how they managed to do that and if they used some kind of special magic. Pikkon explains that in the Zarat realm, there is a type of magical earring that some gods possess. The name of the earring is the Katara, which is a divine artifact, similar to the time rings and the Potara earrings that the Kaioshins of the realm of Zeno have. According to Pikkon, these earrings grant the ability to merge completely distinct beings, and using them, the Celestial Mages were able to merge their souls with the bodies of the Guardians. Moscow interrupts the explanation by emitting some robotic sounds that are incomprehensible to others, but the angel translates for everyone, revealing that Moscow is asking if there's any difference between these earrings in Zarat's realm and the Potara earrings that exist in this realm. Pikkon answers yes. There are many differences between these two artifacts. For starters, there's a difference in the concepts of union that these earrings provide, and he explains this difference by saying that the union caused by the power of the Potara is a fusion, where two beings come together to create a new being. The earrings from the Zarat realm, on the other hand, function as a possession, causing one being to literally take control of another being. Despite the Chief Guardian's efforts to explain this, things are still not very clear to Koitella, who say that this is complicated to understand, and asks if Pikkon could explain how this works in practice. Koitella seems to be a bit embarrassed to ask this question, but he might represent the majority of the other gods there. To leave no more doubts, Pikkon decides to give an example. Using his main hater as an example, Pikkon says that if he wanted to merge with Beerus and use the Potara earrings to do so, what would happen is that he and Beerus would transform into another being, and this being would be more powerful than them if the fusion was successful, and it would have their abilities and possibly other unique abilities. As we can see, a fusion between Beerus and Pikkon would be a very handsome warrior, right? But anyway, Pikkon says that if, on the other hand, he wanted to merge with Beerus using the Kotara earrings, his soul would simply take control of Beerus's body. He would retain the appearance of the Hakaishin, but keep his own powers, his own thoughts, and everything else. I'm not sure if you guys understood this, but explaining the difference in a simpler way, the fusion from the Potara earrings transforms two people into another person, while the fusion from the Kotara earrings has one person take over the other person's body. But continuing, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. On this channel, you're going to find out absolutely everything about Dragon Ball Hakai, and you'll also learn more about the Dragon Ball franchise in general. So if you're a fan of Dragon Ball, this is the right channel for you. Continuing. Belmont, the god of Universe 11, is now understanding the situation better and observes that this means the mages aren't adding and multiplying their powers with the possessed Guardian's power. Rumshi from Universe 10 is glad to hear this because it's already a big problem to face the mages with their original powers, so it's good to know that they haven't become even stronger through this fusion. He also asserts that if they had to confront the mages with amplified powers, it would be catastrophic. Now it's Goku's turn to ask. He recalls that Odisu told him he wasn't using his full power in their fight because his power was still very limited. He asked Pikkon what he meant by that. The Guardian explains that when the possession process is performed, initially the possessor doesn't fully adapt to the body of the possessed one. This happens because it takes some time for the body and soul to become completely united, especially if the possessed one's soul resists. Until the body of the possessed one and the soul of the possessor are in complete synchrony, the original power of that soul is limited. Pikkon suggests that probably for this reason, the mages took a while to make their first move, as they were possibly weakened with the new bodies and wouldn't be able to engage in a high-level battle against the gods of this realm. This is probably also the reason they're waiting 6 months for the final battle. As Goku had mentioned before, Odisu revealed it after their fight. While Pikkon spoke, Beerus caught onto a remark of his is and asks what the chief of the Guardians meant when he mentioned something about resistance. He asks if what Pikkon meant was that Master Terran and the others are still alive and somehow resisting the mage's control. Pikkon says that alive isn't the most appropriate word, but in a way they can say something like that. He explains that the soul-body union provided by these earrings is dangerous. This is because if the process fails, the soul of the one attempting to possess the target can be lost forever, and if the target has a strong spirit, it can repel the possession. So for the union process to be carried out safely, there are only two ways. The first is that the possessed one accepts the possession peacefully, and this certainly isn't the case with the Celestial Guardians that the mages have possessed. The second way is for the one to be possessed to be in a state of near death, where the possessed one is still alive but with a spirit so weak that it can't resist. Therefore, as the Guardians were certainly on the brink of death at the time of the mage's release, they were able to possess them safely. Beerus asks what will happen to the bodies of those who were possessed if these invaders are expelled. Beerus shows a certain anxiety and even irritation with the whole situation. Pikkon answers his question by saying that at this moment, both the bodies and souls of the Guardians are at the brink of life energy. The only thing preventing them from losing this life energy completely is the presence of the mage's souls. If the mage's souls leave their bodies, they will inevitably die. Beerus isn't pleased with this answer. He says that this situation the Guardians are in is very unpleasant, and either they will be kept as slaves or they'll die. Likir, the god of the 8th universe, asks for a turn to speak. He states that they've talked enough about what happened in the past, and in his opinion, they should now discuss the future, like what the mages intend to do from now on and what will happen in 6 months. The time Odisu gave them to prepare. Pikkon says they already know the mage's goal is to bring Zarat back to life, and then he says there are 2 steps left for them to achieve that. The first step is to finish gathering all the 5 great primordial beasts, which are the parts that Zarat was divided into. To gather all the beasts, they still need Majin Buu and Janemba, so obviously they'll go after these beasts in the future. Sidra from Universe 8 understands this first step well, and then asks about the second one. Pikkon explains that there's a whole necessary process to free Zarat. He says he won't explain all the details because even he and the other Guardians don't know very well, but what they do know is that the process involves collecting a massive amount of energy. This energy will be used to free the still trapped beasts and to perform some kind of ritual that will unite them and bring Zarat back. Goku remembers that when Babidi wanted to free Majin Buu on Earth, he also needed to gather a lot of energy. Pikkon says he imagines that the cocoon where the Majin was placed was a copied and much inferior version of the original Majin Buu cocoon. In short, if Goku thinks a lot of energy was needed to free Majin Buu on Earth, thousands of times more will be needed to free the original Majin Buu. And the same goes for all the other sealed beasts. Arak, the god of destruction of the 5th universe, asks how the mages are going to accumulate so much energy. Goku recalls that on Earth, Babidi did that through battles fought by the planet's fighters against his subordinates, and even among themselves. In the almost themselves part, he remembers his fight against Majin Vegeta. Pikkon says that it's certainly what the mages intend to do, but it won't be just local fights on a planet, it will be battles on a multiversal scale. A war that will encompass all universes is coming, and with the energy of all warriors and gods from the 12 universes, the celestial mages will free the 5 great primordial beasts and revive Zarat. Now Goku understands why they warned about the attack. They want the gods and mortals of the realm of Zeno to become more powerful so that they can collect more energy this way. Hela says this is a complicated situation because if they and the mortals become stronger, they'll still be acting according to the mage's plan. On the other hand, if they don't become stronger, they'll have less chance of resisting. Beerus says that these guys act as if regardless of what they do, they'll win, and that irritates him. Likir, who is also irritated by this, guarantees that they'll teach these guys not to mess with the gods of destruction. Belmont says that now they know what the mages want to do, and then he changes the subject to an equally important topic: what they should do now. Koitella is already ready to go on the offensive and asks if there's a way for them to attack these guys before they make their move. Pikkon says no and explains that Lauder, the great seal mage, possesses a sealing magic that can completely hide what is under the effect of that magic. They're definitely in some kind of hideout that's being concealed by that magic, so they can't be found. Therefore, the only thing they can do is wait for the mage's action and take precaution as much as possible. He suggests that all the gods prepare themselves and their mortals for the great battle that's coming. He assures that they, the Celestial Guardians, will also take important measures, both to learn more about the mage's plans and to prevent them. After making this promise, he turns to the Zenos and says he has a few requests he'd like to make to them. To start with, he'd like to possess the remaining power of Majin Buu that was taken from the cocoon, and he says that power is divided into 2 creatures living in Universe 7. Here, he's referring to Oob and Fat Majin Buu. But this request infuriates Beerus, completely asking why now. He says that Pikkon already has most of Majin Buu's power, and that other creature that was with Frieza, he also also says that while Pikkon was in Universe 7, he completely ignored the existence of the chubby one and that kid, and it was him who needed to save them. So why does Pikkon care about them now? With his usual politeness, the Master of the Celestial Guardians explains that the reason he didn't go after those two is simple, because they constitute a very small part of Majin Buu's power. Obviously, the priority of the Guardians should have been the cocoon that contained almost all of the creature's power. Moreover, the portion of power those two represent is so small that they are almost irrelevant to the liberation of Zarat. Beerus interrupts the explanation even angrier. He asks why Pikkon and the mages wanted those two if they're so irrelevant. The Guardian explains that even though they are a small part of Zarat's power, the fact is that they're still part of Zarat and have his essence. Therefore, Pikkon believes they might be able to study them and discover something relevant about Zarat, and he thinks the mages have the same thought. He tells that the celestial mages have had this desire for a long time, but making any alterations or experiments on the cocoon is strictly forbidden. And even after this part of Majin Buu's power was freed in Universe 7, they couldn't do anything because it was in the possession of a mortal, and it was also too small a portion of power for their intervention to be necessary. But now, faced with this very particular situation, the opportunity and also the necessity for them to do this has arisen. In summary, what Pikkon is saying here is that the Guardians have always been interested in using the Majin Buu living in Universe 7 for studies, but they couldn't do it before because it wasn't allowed for the Celestial Mages to intervene due to their own rules. But now, because of this whole situation, they will seize this opportunity to do what they've always wanted, as it can also be important in this case. In other words, Pikkon here wants to kill two birds with one stone. But Beerus doesn't intend to give him this chance and is about to say he won't allow it. But Zeno interrupts, taking all the authority away from the Hakai and saying that Pikkon can take them. This shocks Beerus, who once again loses all his ferocity. The other Zeno justifies this decision and says that Mr. Pikkon knows what to do, so it's better this way. Beerus has no recourse, so he can only agree. Shin, next to him, also seems not very happy, but there's nothing to be done. After obtaining the consent of the Supreme Gods, Pikkon expresses gratitude and then he mentions his final request. He says that in Universe 7 there are two mortals in particular who are of interest to the Celestial Guardians. He says he can explain the reason for this interest privately later, but in short, they could be very important in the victory against the Celestial Mages. Upon hearing this, Goku becomes very curious and asks if he knows these mortals the Guardians are referring to. Meanwhile, in the mountainous region of planet Earth, two men can be seen with their capes fluttering in the wind's strength. These men are Gohan and Piccolo, who stare at each other, clearly about to engage in combat. With a stern look, Piccolo calls on Gohan to begin, and in response to his master and friend's invitation, Gohan takes off his glasses and tosses them away. Then with a determined look, agrees. After a long meeting, it seems that the realm of Zeno has finally understood the entire situation involving the Celestial Mages, and now knows how to proceed. However, some mysteries remain, such as what Pikkon will do with Majin Buu and Ooh, and also what the Celestial Guardians want with Gohan and Piccolo. Now, the plot of Dragon Ball Hakai enters a new phase. How will the gods and mortals prepare for the great battle that is to come? Find out in the upcoming chapters of Dragon Ball Hakai. This was chapter 28. I know that this chapter, just like the previous one, had a great focus on dialogues and expository explanations, but at least now the whole plot is well explained in an organized manner, I believe. From now on, a new phase begins, and I would like you to comment on your opinions about what has happened so far, and also about what will happen. If you want to read this complete chapter, you can do so on our website, dbhakai.com. On the website, you will find all the chapters of the story, including what I just recounted in this video. Don't forget to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and also visit our Patreon if you want to help directly in the manga's production. I thank everyone who stayed until the end. Until next time.